dark night, she reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star.
Greetings, and as always, welcome back. In early June, Donald Trump sent nearly 5,000 federal troops to occupy Los Angeles under the pretext of quashing protests, saying in a social media post that if we had not done so, Los Angeles would have been completely obliterated. And Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, an African-American woman, responded, "We don't need the National Guard. Why on earth would we? What are they going to do?" Well, this past Monday, Trump deployed the National Guard to the political enclave, Washington, D.C., the only city in the United States not tied to a state, and took control of the city's police force, pledging to crack down on crime and homelessness in the city. The city's mayor, Muriel Bowser, an African-American woman, has rejected the president's claims about crime. What's going on here? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. With each show, my guests and I provide insight and analysis into current events and the broader historical context in which most of these events occur. I want to quickly look at one headline that I want to hit on today. The Guardian reports, Putin faces, quote, very severe consequences, end quote, if no Ukraine truce agreed, according to Trump. Asked if Russia would face consequences if Putin did not agree to stop the war after the Alaska meeting, Trump said, quote, yes, they will. Very serious consequences, end quote. So let me be sure I understand this so-called logic. Lil Marco Rubio said in March, quote, it's been very clear from the beginning that President Trump views this as a protracted, stalemated conflict, and frankly, it's a proxy war between nuclear powers, the United States helping Ukraine and Russia, end quote. If that's the case, and we understand how this started and who is responsible for starting it, how can Trump look Putin in the eye with a straight face and expect Putin not to just bust out laughing? 3 points quickly. 1, the U.S. government knew NATO expansion to Ukraine would force Russia to intervene. How do I know this? Because former U.S. ambassador to Russia, Bill Burns, who is now the CIA director, admitted in a classified 2008 embassy cable that NATO expansion to Ukraine crosses Moscow's security red lines and, quote, could potentially split the country, Ukraine, into two, leading to violence or even, some claim, civil war, which would force Russia to decide whether to intervene, end quote. That's Bill Burns in 2008. The confidential State Department cable was then titled Niet Means Niet, Russia's NATO Enlargement Red Lines. And Niet in Russian means no. So Bill Burns was telling the State Department, it's very clear from talking to Lavrov and others in the Russian government, no means no. Two, based on this reality, I don't know how much time Bill Burns has spent on the corner, but on the corner and in the pool halls all over the world, there's an understanding. You can walk into, I don't care what pool hall, don't start nothing, won't be nothing. And finally, Russia is winning this conflict. And the U.S. started the conflict. In case history has not been made clear, folks, Russia doesn't bluff, they don't blink. So we'll see what happens in Alaska on Friday. On today's episode, the issue before us is Trump has sent U.S. troops into another U.S. city under false pretenses and is threatening to occupy others as well. How concerned should we be? Well, my guest is an international human rights activist, organizer, political analyst. He's the national organizer for Black Alliance for Peace, Brother Ajamu Baraka. As always, welcome back.
Good to be here, and I'm really glad that you open up the show with that example, because you're connecting the dots, and there is a clear connection here in terms of the over reliance on militarism to advance U.S. interests, be it domestic or international. So this is what we're dealing with today with this issue of the federal or the national takeover of this colonial space called the Washington, D.C., and is connected to the kind of aggressive militarism that we've seen that has resulted in this Ukrainian war. That, as you laid out, it was quite understandable that the NATO expansion had reached its limits. And with the threat to include Ukraine, that was the threat that basically precipitated the special military operation on the part of the Russians. So, and this is has been a bipartisan expansion, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Same way it's been a bipartisan bipartisan policies that have resulted in the strengthening of the repressive apparatus on the local level within the U.S., the crime bills, and all of the elements that have been put in place in which Black people, Latino people, and other working class folks have felt the iron fist of this state. And now this move by the Trump administration is just really the most dramatic of that continuing development toward the consolidation of fascism in the United States of America.
Staying with the issue with Russia just for another moment, one of the tells here, and folks, if you play cards, you know what the tell is. One of the tells to me is Zelensky is not going to be at the table. Trump met virtually today with Russian leaders, and they all are now apparently, if you read the Financial Times, if you read the Wall Street Journal, if you read they're all now singing on the same accord. But Zelensky won't be in the room. So that says a couple of things to me. One, it's obvious. Lil Marco was right. This is a proxy war. Zelensky can pound his fist, kick and scream, bang his head on the floor all he wants. He's making no decisions here. And the other tell to me is Trump's bluffing. Because if look, man, if it's you and I, if it's Wilmer Leon and Ajamu Baraka against the world, well, when we got to sit down and negotiate, you and I are rolling into the room shoulder to shoulder on the same accord. So the fact that Zelensky is going to be left sitting wherever he's left sitting, and Trump says, "I'll call you as soon as the meeting's over," no.
Look, this is real politics, and Zelensky is no more than a gopher, a face that was able to be used to galvanize Western support, Western public support for the proxy war between NATO and the Russian Federation. Now that they are moving towards some type of resolution of this issue, then there's no role, there's no need for a Zelensky. He will be told what the decisions will be, and he will abide by them, or they will move him out of the way. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows that basically in a very real way, Zelensky is really a dead man walking, because we know that history has demonstrated that once the U.S. has used a front person and they become a problem when they continue to try to uphold what they see as their national interest, but the U.S. interest has shifted, then the U.S. has found ways of removing these individuals permanently from the equation. So what we are seeing now is moving toward a resolution, we think. But I would argue, Dr. Leon, that the Trump administration is playing a very dangerous game, playing along with the Europeans, putting more emphasis into this summit on Friday than those of us who follow this understand what the real possibilities might be. That basically they're not coming out of this summit with a real resolution, and definitely not a ceasefire. And the Trump was so cynical about this, Dr.
Wait a
Leon.
minute, wait a minute. Why won't they come out of this summit on Friday with a real resolution?
Because when we talk about real politics, you have to look at the concrete realities. And basically what we see on the ground in Russia, on the ground in Ukraine, is that the Russians have no incentive to put a break on their summer offensive. It is the Ukrainian forces that are beginning to break. There was a significant breakthrough that happened 2 days ago.
Correct.
And basically on the ground, the reality on the ground is that the Ukrainians, along with the U.S. and their Western backers, they have no cards. The Russians hold the cards. Okay. And so these threats about 50 days, and then you extend it for another 10, 12 days or whatever, and then this latest threat of severe consequences, it really means nothing. What happened with this summit, Dr. Leon, I would argue, is that the Putin, the Russian Federation, Putin, gave Trump a gift. I tweeted this out this morning, that basically by agreeing to this summit that was requested by the Trump envoy, it allowed Trump to save face, because there was nothing that was going to happen as we as we approach that deadline. And so this so-called summit allowed attention to be diverted away from the fact that the Russians hadn't moved, and that there were going to be this conversation, but everybody knew that there was not the preparation that's put in place for a real substantive decision to come out of this meeting. That's why Trump said the other day that it was going to be a quote unquote listening, listening event. Okay?
Yes.
Now he's trying to pretend, as a consequence of this meeting with the Europeans and this panic that they have, that there's going to be a decision made around so-called swapping land. Then now he wants to pretend to be tough. But this is the problem. I tweeted this out this morning. With this threat, Dr. Leon, of severe consequences, if I was advising the Putin, the Russian Federation, for me, I think there's grounds for them to pull out of the conversation. Why do you want to provide an opportunity for this kind of blustering, this kind of PR stunt? Okay, if there's not going to be a serious conversation, is leading toward an agreement on a process, because that's all you can come out of this meeting with, then why even go? Why give the West this opportunity? So I don't know who is advising these psychopaths making policy in the West, but clearly it is they are making decisions that are against their own interests. The war is over, folks. The war has been lost.
A long
And
time.
everybody who's honest, they know that. Okay. So only thing that can happen is a series of continued mistakes that can escalate this conflict between NATO and Russia to a potential nuclear confrontation.
A couple of things to what you've just said, and I think you are spot on every point. One is Trump's statement about severe consequences is consistent with what I have seen as being the United States negotiating strategy since the end of the Carter administration. And that is, it's not negotiation, it's capitulation. You are going, as my adversary, you are going to concede to my position before we get to the table. And then once we're at the table, we'll just figure out what color paper we're going to write it on and what color ink we're going to use. And this is along with China and Iran. But this is really the first time in years that the United States has met an adversary that says, no, it ain't going to work this way, homie, and has not conceded. And Vladimir Putin has been consistent for the last 15 years on this point. So when Donald Trump says, I'm going to Alaska, this is a listening session, what the hell are you going to listen to that you haven't already heard?
Right.
So I think you're spot on, and with the understanding that this thing is over and has been over. It's now a matter of Putin just asking Donald Trump, how long do you want me to keep kicking your ass? That's the question. So why is Europe continuing to perpetuate this mythology and throw good money after bad and continue to kill good human beings after so many others have perished?
I think it's a reflection of the quality of the leadership in the West, which, and we have talked about this before, which is the lowest probably ever in the history of the Western world. These individuals are not being guided by an assessment of objective reality. They are steeped in subjectivism. They want to operate in the world that does not exist. They cannot come to terms with the fact that they made a monumental mistake in trying to impose a quote unquote strategic defeat on the Russian Federation that is now blown back on them. They have been defeated themselves, and they cannot accept that. That's the level of political immaturity that we see with these leaders. You may not want to accept it, but it is the objective reality. And again, this is what we are missing now with the, not just with the Western leaders, but with the secession of leadership in the US also, since, I would argue, since the 1990s. The last mature administration, in my opinion, that was in power was the administration of George Herbert Walker Bush. Okay. And these individuals were guided by the realist school, a school that people like Brzezinski and Henry Kissinger belong to. They said you look at the objective realities. You attempt to try to understand the perspective and the interests of your adversary. You don't engage in idealism. When you do that, that's when you make the major mistakes. And we've seen that happen over and over again since the 1990s by successive U.S. administrations. They seem to be operating in the world or in a parallel universe, really. And so this is the danger we face today, that basically we have immature leadership from the West. We have people who are being guided by idealism, a world in which they would like it to be, but it's not what exists. And as a consequence, we are facing one of the most dangerous existential threats for humanity that we ever face, because these individuals are completely inept. They are incompetent. They are Trump basically is a psychopath, and this is where we are today. And we got Ukraine and this situation, and now we got Ukraine. Now we got the Trump administration. The cycles are now pretending that there is some existential threat in the U.S. that requires another bout of militarism, and it's all connected. And the connecting tissue is this: they cannot come to terms with the end of white world supremacy. They can't deal with it. They are psychologically unable to deal with that, and psychologically and unfortunately, I think culturally unable to live in the world in a way in which they will respect equality and respect for others.
A couple of points, and then we'll move on to DC. One is Rochelle at Newport says, I think it's a setup. Putin needs to Zoom that meeting from Russia. One of the questions that I posed was, there is an arrest warrant for him from the ICC. And I wondered his logic in coming into American airspace to see an utter maniac like Donald Trump. To Rochelle's point, I would have thought to try to meet on more neutral ground. But obviously Putin knows a hell of a lot that I don't know. The other point is, and I want people to really understand, and I've said this a number of times, but I think it bears repeating. When you talk about the incompetence of the West, that is not hyperbole on your part. That is not unnecessary rhetoric on your part. People need to understand that Foreign Minister Wang Yi in China is a trained diplomat. He went to school to study diplomacy in China from the Chinese perspective. He worked his way up through the ranks as a diplomat. Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russia, is a trained diplomat, been in the game 40 years. Lil Marco Rubio is a political appointee. He was given the job. He didn't earn the job. He was given the job and has no idea what the hell to do. You might as well take your Ferrari to a bakery to have it repaired when you send Lil Marco in to solve this problem. And Robert Brown, 6115, thank you for that $10 super sticker. Ajamu.
I mean, you're absolutely correct. And that's the difference between the leadership in the West and the leadership we see emanating from the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China, and even someone like Modi from India. These are serious individuals, mature and serious individuals, whether one agrees with them or not. But the degeneration of politics in the U.S. has resulted in these individuals occupying positions that they're not qualified for, and because of the constant assaults on the bureaucracies within the state, on the individuals who work in the State Department, for example, and even some of the people who work in the various intelligence agencies. They have really, it's been a real diminution in the quality of the intelligence being produced and the individuals who are providing analysis for U.S. policies. It is a serious situation that we find ourselves in, because these individuals are sitting on top of this massive amount of power, and they are, as you said, they really don't have a clue. They are basically faking the funk every day.
I think that's called the Pinocchio theory. Don't fake the funk, or your nose has got to grow. So now to DC. We started in Los Angeles, as I said in the open. Karen Bass, African American, female mayor. Now we're in DC. Muriel Bowser, African American, female mayor. Are we seeing a pattern here, first of all? And well, I'll start with that. Ajamu Baraka.
Well, I mean, look, what the pattern is basically we have these African American women who have fought their way up to the top of the chain of neoliberal or neo-colonial representation,
Mm-hmm.
and is I mean, San Francisco, L.A. I mean, in Chicago at one moment, Atlanta. You know, unfortunately, though, when you go past the gender issue and you look at the politics, the pattern is it is the same kind of politics, the same kind of liberal reformist politics, very, very conservative, if you will, no real ideals around the issues facing their urban constituencies. And as a consequence, we see that the conditions that our people face, African people, Latino face in these urban environments, continues to deteriorate. So yes, it is. That's the political pattern that we see.
And
But the
women, and
pattern is going.
don't forget Barbara Lee in Oakland.
Yes, there you go. And so the issue is this: with this adventurism that we see now taking place in Washington, and the threat that is going to be, one, extended, and secondly, that it could be brought to a city by you. You know, this is a very dangerous development, and I wonder. I mean, I'm getting the sense, Dr. Leon, that people understand the threat. You know, that this is the rhetoric has moved from the rapists and murderers of the brown others coming across the borders to now the thugs and the wild youth and the criminals of the homegrown African American population. And that's why people didn't understand the danger of buying into this racist rhetoric coming from the Trump administration. They felt like, oh, well, you know, it's not directed at us, you know, so it ain't our struggle. You know, you don't understand what they're trying to do. This administration and this movement that they represent is a movement to reclaim the white supremacist roots, foundations, if you will, of this national entity we call the United States of America. That basically anything that's not white is now being marginalized, and that what is being articulated, what is being advanced in unashamed ways is the notion of white male supremacy. Okay, and so this is a threat for all of us because the otherness, other making other people the enemies. One at first the people coming in, and now the internal enemies. These are the building blocks, the recipes, if you will, for consolidating fascism. And so this is a dangerous development that we have to stop in Washington. Okay, we can allow this to be a successful experiment. So we have to organize, and opposition is in fact being organized in Washington, D.C. It's going to be, we have to, when they begin to expand these National Guard checkpoints into our communities. And remember this, and you've been around long enough too to remember this too, that when we had the urban rebellions, when they would bring the National Guard in, it will be at those National Guard checkpoints.
Are you talking about the 60s?
Yes.
Okay.
And 70s.
Yeah.
It'll be at those National Guard checkpoints where we have more of our people dying than during the so-called rebellion. You know, this is militarization. This is the army being used to suppress a people. And what is happening here is this: they don't care about the crime rates. Well, this is a political statement. This is a shot across the bow, if you will, targeting the population that consistently over the history of this country has been the population most in opposition to injustice. Okay, and they're trying to intimidate us into passivity, into resignation, and we say it ain't gonna happen. You know, we want peace like everybody else, but we understand that this is a declaration of war, and we're not going to allow ourselves to be victimized. That we say basically collective self-defense and collective resistance are fundamental human rights. They're people-centered human rights, and we will exercise those human rights.
Robert Brown, 6115. Thank you very much for that $5 super sticker. That's $15 for you today. Thank you very much for that contribution. Greatly appreciate that. I see this as the expansion of the trial run for martial law. That when you look at the Trump agenda, you look at tariffs, the tariff policy is failing. And people are seeing now they're starting to incur the cost of the tariff. They're paying more for things across the board. The sanctions regime is failing. And whether it's Trump deciding in 2028 that he's not leaving, or whether it is blowback, thank you, Chalmers Johnson, whether it's blowback from the populace against these fascistic policies, they're testing the waters for the declaration of martial law.
And I think you're right. And why are they doing that? Well, they're doing that because they recognize, the ruling elements recognize that there are no solutions for the deepening crisis of working class people and poor people in the United States of America. And therefore, repression, state violence is the only instrument that they have left. They have abandoned the idea of trying to persuade people and keep people contained through ideological means. Now is naked power. And so, yes, this is the next phase of their attempt, their desperate attempt to maintain order and to maintain their dominance in this society and beyond this society, because we have to keep on reminding ourselves, Washington, D.C. is not just the capital of the U.S. Washington, D.C. is the capital of the U.S. empire. And it is this empire that they are struggling to try to maintain as they are facing significant opposition from their adversaries, primarily at this point from the Russian Federation, the Chinese, to a certain extent the Indians because of their growing economic clout, the Iranians. That these are the elements they are desperately trying to contain, those elements that are part of the BRICS coalition, that these racist white supremacists who cannot live on the planet without being in charge, they're the ones that are trying to undermine these nations. And this is the recipe for conflict, the recipe for international conflict, international war. And so we have to understand the context that we are existing in today. War abroad and war domestically.
Let's look at a little bit of the language that Trump has used. At a press conference on Monday, I believe it was, he said that going forward, police officers would be unhinged in their treatment of criminals and likely dissenters. They'll be able to do whatever they want. You spit, we hit. This is Liberation Day for Washington. Crime, savagery, filth, and scum will disappear. That sounds somewhat when he talks about crime, savagery, filth, and scum. That sounds very Mein Kampfish talking about vermin and, you know, Ajamu.
On this program, are you allowed to say the quote unquote N word?
Well, if we're not, then, you know, I'll have my people talk to your people.
When they talk about the liberation, and they talk about crime and filth and savagery, these are all code words.
Mm-hmm.
They are code words for us, the ends, if you will, okay? And we have to understand that basically this is they're coming to us now.
Do the ends justify the means? I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go
ahead. We may have to at some point, but this is what we are up against. And basically, if they are allowed to do this in this city, it's coming to Chicago. It's going to go back to LA. It's coming to Philly. It's coming to all of the places where we have significant numbers of our people in these urban areas. Okay, and that's why we make the argument. We've been making the argument through the Black Alliance of Peace that we've got to revive this international perspective. Understand that we're not just here in the U.S. That we are part of a global reality. That Black people are connected to other Black people and other non-European colonized people. That we are also working class people, and that this is the desperate attempt by these colonial capitalists to maintain their hegemony by any means necessary. So when he talks about giving freedom to the police, he's saying basically, don't worry about the Constitution. It means nothing. You don't have to have any kind of constraints on the Constitution. I mean, you don't worry about that. And the same thing with the human rights framework. Don't worry about human rights because basically we don't recognize these people as having human value.
Mm-hmm.
How can we explain the carnage that's taking place in Gaza when Black people, and then we need to remind Black people of this BS that they have been involved in, making these anti-Black positions that what's happening in Gaza got nothing to do with us. Joining in with this insanity being directed at these poor people, these migrants, who are trying to improve their lives because their economies were destroyed by white capital in their nations. And now we're going to take up the battle against these individuals who are supposed to be the criminals and threats to us. Okay? That basically when you side with the enemy, when you side with these kinds of oppressive forces, you know, it's coming back to you. And then at that point, where is your moral standing? Where's the justification for calling for solidarity with other people? Well, you have embraced and sided with these powerful forces, okay? We've got to reclaim who we are, Dr. Leon, because we have gone mad, particularly these last 20 years. Basically, we believe that we are now, quote unquote, Americans, that we have a stake in this thing, even though our lived realities are different. Our realities, our families, we are mass incarcerated. You know, they're killing us every year. They're murdering us in the streets. You know, we've got to wake up. And I know people don't want to wake up because basically it's scary to understand that we are here, we are in this thing by ourselves. And that basically you're not part of this. You are not part of the American dream. You know, wake up.
I've written a number of times that the reason that Dr. King's speech, and he put his speech in the context of I Have a Dream, was because he was explaining our reality, which was then and continues to be a nightmare. You've made the comment about internationalizing our circumstance and understanding that what's going on here is manifesting itself in other ways throughout the world. Donald Trump sends troops into Los Angeles. Donald Trump sends troops into Washington, D.C. The U.S. has launched 57 airstrikes in Somalia so far this year. The U.S. Africa Command said yesterday that its forces have launched 57 airstrikes in Somalia as the Trump administration has been conducting strikes in the country at a record pace, an air war that gains no media coverage in the United States, and the United States has been working in support of the government in Somalia. So that's just one example to what you're talking about in terms the internationalization of the plight of Black people.
And the absolute necessity for understanding how these things are connected. Understanding that when we talk about Donald Trump and we use these examples, these very real examples, we have to remind ourselves that when they say this is a unprecedented air assault or use of drones in Somalia, when was the last time we had this kind of uptick of the usage of drones in Somalia? Under Barack
Obama.
Hussein Obama, okay? This is a bipartisan thing that we're dealing with, okay? That Trump sends the National Guard into LA, no question about that. Look at what these neoliberal Democrats did under Joe Biden when their own children went to the streets and went to their student centers on their campuses to oppose genocide. And we say their children because this was happening, this opposition to genocide was happening at these elite schools. They attacked their own children. They were prepared to destroy their own children on behalf of Israel and Zionism. This is a vicious ruling class that we're dealing with. Don't forget the moves that were made under Obama to strengthen the national this repressive apparatus. You know, they have now the ability, the state has the ability now to pick you up, to disappear you without any kind of habeas corpus at this point, okay? This is the desperate attempt on the part of a system to maintain their control of their population, and it's bipartisan. The Trump administration is building off of the foundation laid by the Biden administration, by the Obama administration, by the Clinton administration with his crime bill, okay? They've been moving toward this kind of repression and militarism for the last 3 decades. And now it's coming to a head. It's culminating in this open fascistic activity. And we understand fascism because one thing about this social system, this social formation called the United States of America, you can have democracy in one part, but that democracy is based on the fact that you have colonial fascism in the other part, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's what empires can do. So we have been subjected to a fascistic existence in this United States of America for the whole time that we've been here. Remember now, we just got the ability to quote unquote vote in when? 1965? So what do you call the US up until 1965? A democracy? No, we had an apartheid system. And before that, we had enslavement. Okay? Understand who you are, ADOS. Understand that this state is not giving you no reparations, because no individual reparations, because they're trying to maintain their hegemony. They got a $36 trillion debt.
Mm-hmm.
They have to spend $1 trillion every year servicing that debt. When are they gonna come up with some money for you? And you can't demand it because you're not organized. And even if they gave you all some money, what does that mean now? We live side by side in peace and harmony while they're destroying the entire world? Understand who you are. Understand the real relationships. We are at war, and it's not a war that we have embraced. It's not a war that we want. We want peace like any rational people. But they have been waging war on us since the moment that they drug us off the boat and put us in the cotton fields of this country. And all some of us are saying is that, this can't continue to be a one-sided war.
A couple of things. Rochelle at Newport, thank you very much for that $5 super sticker. Kevin, I'm sorry, yeah, Kevin Baptiste 7976, thank you for that super sticker. U.S. is carrying out the kinetic consequences on its people who dare advocate for peace. Very, very well said. And there was another point here that I wanted to hit quickly, which said, oh, here we go. Again, Kevin Baptiste. Folks here in Oakland are gearing up, believe that crime is considerably down in the states mentioned. This is just a war on the populace. I think you're absolutely right. If you want to comment on that, Ajamu, please do. Let me throw one more thing into the mix. You mentioned this is bipartisan. You mentioned Barack Obama. You mentioned Joe Biden. We can go back to Bill Clinton. There are those that believe that we wouldn't be in this mess if Kamala Harris was president. I've said all along, you'd have a different set of problems, but you'd still have serious problems. Scott Ritter told us we'd be in World War III by October if she had been elected president, because she told us she was going to carry forth Joe Biden's policies, and we know what his policy in Ukraine was going to be, that we now would be in a nuclear war by October. So I'll throw that.
I believe that.
You can take it where you want.
Absolutely. And I think that the comments coming from your audience is spot on. People understand. They understand the contradictions. They understand the strategy being laid out in ways that that maybe people didn't have just a few years ago. And this notion that Kamala Harris would have had different policies is absolutely not absolute nonsense. Kamala Harris, look, again, objectively, the national security strategy of the U.S. is a strategy committed to the doctrine of full spectrum dominance. Okay, and of that full spectrum dominance, the use of military and military force is front and center. Okay, Kamala Harris said that she was committed to continuing making the U.S. the most lethal force on the planet. Okay, neoliberal Democrats have become and are war criminals. They are war criminals.
She backed genocide in Gaza.
Yeah, and look, and the foundation for the genocide unfolding today was laid under the Biden administration. He's the one. They are the ones that gave the green light to this horrific situation we find ourselves witnessing every day in Gaza. And can no one out there who has an ounce of honesty can tell me that if we had images of white people being burnt to death, skeletal people who are being starved to death, credible reports of torture, people being raped to death, that if this was a white population, that this would have been stopped on day number 2. The fact that this can happen, it happened for almost 2 years now, is a manifestation of the normalization of white supremacy. The idea that these Palestinians have no value as human beings, and that this is what you can do to a people who are not valued, a people who you don't recognize their humanity. This is Amalek, as Netanyahu called them. These are the human animals that you can treat like human animals. And the fact that Black folks cannot see that and pretend like this has nothing to do with you, if they can do that to Palestinians, what in the hell do you think they're going to do to us? Okay, if we allow that. You are dealing with some freaks. You're dealing with criminals who have no regard for humanity at all. And you better understand that. because this is, look, we can't play with this. That's why I'm being upfront.
Mhm.
We can no longer pretend. We can't play with this. We can't play with the fact that we are at war and we're not ready for it. We
Not at
better
all.
get ready.
Not at all. In fact,
Better
I've
get
had
ready.
I've had some people say to me, you know, brothers in DC are gonna take it to the National Guard. Really? How have they been organized? How have we been organized? And I'm not advocating this. I'm asking the question. How have we organized ourselves to respond in any responsible, comprehensive way to this type of assault that we've been predicting for a very long time?
Well, you know, Dr. Leon, one thing about our people is that there is a spirit of resistance. There's no
Oh,
question
that's
about
true.
that.
I got that. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you need
And
organized resistance on this one.
that's where we're going with that. That basically we say we're not prepared, meaning that we're not prepared politically and in other ways. And a people who are unable to defend themselves are vulnerable people. And basically we have to recognize that and reverse that, correct that. Okay. So yeah, there can be and there will be if they extend these National Guard checkpoints and all that, there will be incidents. People will end up going to jail and people may even get hurt. We hope that's not the case. But this should be a bit of a wake-up call for people to understand, one, who we are in our relationship to the state, and secondly, the absolute necessity for us to get organized and to begin to think about real self-reliance, self-organization, building power and the ability to defend ourselves, but also the ability to take care of our own material needs. So this is where we are in 2025, folks. The year people were romanticized and talked about, you know, the 1960s and 1970s, and they wish they were there and what they would have done. You here in 2025, and this situation is even more dangerous than what we faced in the 1970s. I'm telling you, okay? So the question becomes, what are you going to do?
We've heard the adage from Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing without demand. It never did, and it never will. One of the elements that folks don't read is, what does Frederick Douglass say after that? Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue till they are resisted with either words or blows or both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. That's a piece of this, of that speech that most folks never read.
Right. But the other element to that too, Dr. Leon, is
Mhm.
that those forces that oppress us, that oppression takes different forms,
Mhm.
direct
Mhm.
um, and indirect. And right now, what we have to deal with in these areas where we have significant numbers of our people, we have to deal with this buffer class, this black misleadership element that's been put in those places to control the natives, to manage the natives, if you will. They have no commitment to anything that we could identify as having the interests of Black people at heart. Their role there is to manage us. And they will do that and do that with great enthusiasm. So we can't even get to the primary enemy without going through this buffer class. And that's the other element that we don't want to have to deal with. And it's people don't want to even think about the fact that we have an internal struggle also,
Mhm.
that we can't have revolutionary unity pretending like we're going to be able to unite all of our people, including those people who have interests that are counter to the vast majority of our people whose interests are to identify and associate with massa, who are looking for the crumbs from massa, who want to live the lifestyle of massa, okay? And they will do whatever they need to do to maintain their place in the house. So this is what we got to deal with, and this is cruel and stark, But as we say, this is a critical historical moment, and we've got to disabuse ourselves of any illusions about where we are at. You all out there fighting among or fighting against Africans from Jamaica or Africans from the continent and all this BS, you better understand that we all in this boat together. Okay.
Can you give me about 5 extra minutes?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Let me thank Melissa 1611 for that $5 super sticker. Also, Vivica, I think that's who that is, for that $20 super sticker. Thank you very much. When you talk about the Black Miss Leadership class, I just want to make this one point. We were talking about Mayor Karen Bass in Los Angeles. Folks also need to understand at one point in her career, Vivicara. I'm sorry for that mispronunciation and my bad glasses not being able to read small print. Vivicara, thank you very much for that $20 super sticker. People need to understand Karen Bass was on the board of directors of the National Endowment for Democracy once upon a time. And so, folks, look up what the National Endowment for Democracy did and does. And I think that's a validation of your point. Not that you need that, but I thought I'd throw that data point out there. And final question for you. We look at the 7,000 troops sent to Los Angeles. We look at the 1,000 in DC. We haven't talked about cop cities. And I don't think we can walk away from this conversation without connecting the dots between what we're seeing now, the growth of the incarceral state in the United States, and cop cities, the militarization of domestic policing.
You're absolutely right. And so the question becomes, why do we have this phenomenon of cop cities all of a sudden? I would argue that the only way you can explain that is the fact that the ruling elements recognize that this crisis is irreconcilable. It cannot be solved through natural reform. And that basically that the people in this country, the people who occupy spaces of national importance or strategic importance in these urban areas, they have to be controlled and contained. And it means you have to strengthen the repressive apparatus. You have to strengthen the ability and the skills of these police forces. And that's what we have with this cop city phenomenon. That's one aspect of it we have to deal with. The other aspect of the militarization is this national police force called ICE, that is again being used not just to identify what Trump talked about, the worst of the so-called immigrants or migrants. These they're being used to basically satisfy the bloodthirsty desires of some elements of his base, the otherness again of these non-European elements, these vulnerable elements that can now be misused and used as political symbols. So they go into schools and picking people up. They're going to the raiding outside Home Depots and going to the fields and harassing people. So these are two elements of this manifestation of militarism. What do we do in response? We got to have a fight back. We are building and advocating for building these community self-defense coalitions that combine both the Black folks, African Americans, Africans, if you will, and Latinos who are being terrorized in their houses, who are being terrorized every day. We need to build new kinds of coalitions against this kind of madness. Okay, and so there's going to be a fight back, and there is a fight back. We're not going to allow Trump or any other force to intimidate us into passivity. We're not going to surrender our rights. We say in the Black Alliance of Peace and our project, North-South Project for People-Centered Human Rights, that we don't beg for human rights. We organize and we take our rights. Okay, we defend our rights. And so basically that's what we have to do today. We are human beings. We deserve to live in dignity and freedom. And we will struggle against all forces that attempt to undermine our ability to live as full-fledged human beings. That's what Malcolm talked about, one of the shining examples of the Black human rights tradition, and that is our calling card. Basically, we organize and we're going to struggle. We're going to struggle not only with African people, but with other oppressed people, and build the kind of dynamic coalitions we have to build in order to not only resist, but also to build a new world.
And we have a super sticker from Donald. We have to build a new world. Absolutely right. We have a super sticker from Donald Drazenovich. Thank you very much for that, Donald Drazenovich. And final point to you, and final question to you. You were referencing the rounding up of these undocumented immigrants. Pam Bondi talking about how these evil people, these enemies, must be deported, but she's made these determinations and placing these labels on people without due process. So Pam Bondi, how do you know what these people are guilty of, if anything, if they are deported, or in the case of American citizens, exiled without due process? Do you see similarities, or is it hyperbole to draw parallels between what happened to Jews in Germany in World War II and what's happening in the United? We've got now this Alligator Alley detention center that's been built in Florida. Donald Trump was talking about firing up Alcatraz again. Again, the increase in the incarceral state. Do you see any parallels between the then and the now?
Of course. I mean, that's how the European manifestations of fascism operate. That you have these internal others, or you even import the others. They become a target to galvanize support and to divert attention away from the fact that you have now this new coalition, this ruling class coalition between a middle class political movement, the state, and the ruling economic elites. Okay, that's how you divert the people away from a struggle against them, against the ruling class, and you have the attention being put on these vulnerable populations. So yeah, this is a part of the calling card, but we're not going to fall for it. And so it is those parallels, but also another parallel we have to keep on reminding people of that's unfolding before our eyes, and that is Gaza. What we see in Gaza is Nazism, okay? And what we see being imported or being developed more in the U.S. is Nazism. This is the capitalist response to crisis. It is fascism, and we need to be prepared for that, and we are going to be prepared for that.
Brother Ajamu Baraka, thank you so much for your time today. Greatly appreciated as always. We look forward to having you back.
My pleasure.
Folks, thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. New episode tomorrow. Brother Nico House will join us tomorrow. Nico House will join us. He'll be in the house with us tomorrow. Please follow and subscribe. Thank you all today. Those of you with your very, very generous contributions, we greatly appreciate it. We're trying desperately to hit that 10,000 subscriber mark. So we need you all to go to YouTube and subscribe via YouTube. Thank you. Leave a review, share the show, all of that. Follow us on social media. Remember that this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. Why? Because we're rhetoric free. See y'all tomorrow. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a blessed remainder of your day. Peace. I'm out. I'm supposed to be out.